Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last chapter, we got to see Paul preparing to take the test that all Fremen undergo, and that's kind of like this passage into manhood kind of thing, and that is riding a giant sandworm. Because at this point, Paul has been leading the Fremen. He's come up as this new religious figure of Muad'Dib. Word of Muad'Dib have even reached back to House Harkonnen. But no one's really taken this serious yet. And right now, Paul has to prove himself because he hasn't done with something that's very common among the Fremen, that even Fremen much younger than him have already done, and that's riding a giant sandworm. So that's what that last chapter dealt with. So this chapter is all about Lady Jessica, and she's waiting to hear word back from how Paul's test went. So she's very worried that something might happen. He could be killed doing this because it is a giant sandworm. Even though he's very capable, accidents happen. So she has all these doubts going through her mind. And then as she's wondering all this, there's a Fremen woman who's giving birth to a child. And so she expects soon they're going to want her to give her blessing to the child and all that, because she is the Reverend Mother. And so while all this is going on, Harah brings Alia. And she brings her to Jessica because Alia is causing a stir among the other Fremen because of her strangeness. So what Alia did was she watched the Fremen woman give birth to the child, then went over and touched him as he was crying, and he stopped crying, and this freaked all the other Fremen out. And on top of that, she doesn't want to play with the other children her age, and at this point, Alia is 2 years old. And so what is so strange about her is she is only 2 years old, but her mental capacity is far beyond that of any adult, because where Jessica consumed the water of life while she was pregnant with Alia, Alia became fully consciousness inside Jessica's womb. Not only that, she has all the memories of all these past Bene Gesserit going back like thousands of years. And we can see more evidence of that in this chapter. And so all the other Fremen are like completely freaked out by Alia, and it would be weird, it would be very strange to have such a small child with this expansive mind that is operating on another level you can't even comprehend. And so they all think she's an abomination, or they all think she's a demon. So Harah comes to Jessica to warn her about this. Now Harah doesn't think this herself of Alia. Harah thinks of Alia as her own daughter, and is protective of her and loves her like her own child. But what she is doing is she is forewarning Jessica about how the other Fremen are perceiving Alia. And then in this chapter, we get a good viewpoint of Alia and what happened to her while she was actually in the womb, and how she was just awoken into full consciousness and what this did to her, which I thought was really interesting. We get an explanation on how that works. We also get something mentioned about a spark. Alia can feel her mother's spark, and she could feel the spark of the child. And referring to spark as it could mean their consciousness or some kind of their soul or something like that. It's left a little bit vague, which is the way Frank Herbert writes. So the thing she says about it when she's brought in full consciousness, she, discusses how it felt, because they want Harah to go, and they decide the best way to handle this is just have Harah, because the other Fremen will listen to her, is just tell them the absolute truth about Alia. That Jessica was pregnant with her, but she didn't tell anyone, and she didn't know how this was going to affect her baby. But she took the water of life anyway, and because of her, this is what happened to Alia. So Alia says she just awoke. Like she woke up, but from a sleep that she had no memory of ever, but never having any memory of actually going to sleep. She just awoke, and she was fully conscious. And then she felt trapped and afraid because she's just fully aware, but she has no knowledge of where she's at or what she is. So she's afraid because it's all the most fear. People fear the unknown. So what's would be more unknown than that? You're just like this consciousness that just appears fully conscious in this place. You don't know where it is or what you are or anything. So she wanted to find some escape, but couldn't find that escape until she felt her mother's spark. And then her mother's spark calmed her down, and she felt that everything was going to be all right. She felt like this, like, it's not like a verbal communication or almost like not even a telepathic communication, but almost like an emotional one, that her mother's spark conveys this to her, that you don't have to worry, everything's going to be all right, you're safe. And then she calms down. And then she says she remembers then the old Reverend Mother passing all the past lives and knowledge and memories on to Jessica. And then as a result of that, she became aware of it too. She was all these different lives that she was able to remember, and going back all these thousands of years. And on top of that, she describes how she like lost herself among all the voices. Because that's the thing about having all these other memories. It's like you have the complete memory of another person. So part of you becomes that person. It's just like that person is reborn or alive, or to the point where you would almost think you were that person, almost like reincarnated or something. So the way it's described in the book, you would almost suffer from a split personality. And so imagine having multiple lifetimes in your memory. So from your point of view, it would have been you actually lived all those lifetimes and you actually were all those people. And so there would run the risk of you losing your own personality in that and being overtaken by a more dominant one. And so Alia describes how she lost herself in all these different voices and memories and lives that go back who knows how long. And that it took some time before she regained herself and found herself again. And she talks about having memories going all the way back to Harmonthep and all those planets that the ancestors of the Fremen lived on, and memories of how nice it was. And that's the other thing that's interesting, of how nice it was on those planets before slavers came and killed their men and captured them all for slaves and things like that. And they had to move again until they finally ended up on Arrakis and evolved into the Fremen. So Alia has those memories of those people going all that way back. That's a long way, because we know the Fremen have been on Arrakis at least 20,000 or 10,000 years. So that's pretty crazy. And so we get a point of view of Alia and how she has to deal with all this and what effect this has on her. So Harah is instructed to just tell the truth, tell the Fremen, so they, won't look at Alia as some kind of strange demonic force. And that's the only way they can really deal with it. And then we also get to hear the chantings of a ritual that's going on the same day. And this ritual is the way the Fremen remember their ancestors who were enslaved, and how these other slave traders came to their worlds and killed their men and took the women and children and turned them into slaves and all that kind of stuff. So they will always remember that. So this is like this ritual is like a memorial to that, a remembrance to those to their ancestors. And so we get a bit of history of all the different planets that they have been on, and because they were descendant from the Zensuni wanderers who went from planet to planet, and their lives, as I said earlier, were very much different. They had nice farms, it sounded like they had very comfortable lives until it was disrupted by people wanting to enslave them and things like that. So we have all that going on, and then the other thing is we get word from another Fremen woman that there is some stirrings among the Fremen men. And the woman is one of Stilgar's wives. So she comes in to tell them that if Paul passes the worm riding test, the other Fremen want him to call out Stilgar in battle, because they believe he's now a better leader than Stilgar and he should take over the tribe. And so they have to decide who's going to be the leader in combat. And they're pretty convinced that if Paul fights Stilgar, Paul's going to win. And so Jessica says, this, Sisters of Self and Harah, this isn't going to unite the tribes. This is just going to, Paul's just going to be able to take control of Stilgar's tribe, but their goal is to unite all the Fremen tribes under Muad'Dib. And so this would be totally counterproductive from that. So this is like an old Fremen ritual that they have to break away from. And Harah even agrees with this. Times have changed. It's not the old ways anymore. And it can't go on like it did before. So if Paul calls out Stilgar and fights Stilgar and kills Stilgar, it's going to hurt them as a whole. It's not going to do them any good because it's not going to unite the tribes against the Harkonnens. Because up to this point, the Fremen have been doing all these small raids against the Harkonnens, and it's been 2 years now, and large groups of them have been trained to fight by Paul and his mother, and have been trained in the weirding ways and all that kind of stuff. So they got this hunger. They want more to happen, and this is how this hunger is manifesting itself. And so Jessica realizes that, and it's time for the Fremen to do something bigger. They just can't. They're not content with these small raids. They have to go bigger. And so now they have to figure out a way out of this. How are they going to get out of this? How are they going to keep Paul from challenging Stilgar, which Paul himself probably doesn't want to do? And what would be best is for Stilgar to stay, because he's such an asset, Stilgar is to Paul, that it doesn't really make any logical sense just to waste that asset. So now they have to find a way out of it. So they're trying to think of some way. They have to convince these guys, okay, this isn't the way to do it. We got to change our ways and things like that. And so there's that. And then what's interesting is the chapter kind of ends off with Harah picking up on the fact that Jessica really doesn't approve of Chani marrying Paul. She doesn't approve of that marriage because in Jessica's mind, she comes from a completely different world from the Fremen, where marriage isn't really a thing about love, but about where it can get you politically. So she never ever married Duke Leto. She always remained his concubine, because Duke Leto wanted to ascend to the imperial throne through marriage, through a political marriage. And she wants the same thing for Paul to ascend to the throne through a political marriage. And so if he marries Chani, it's not going to do him any good politically. And so Harah points out, well, but she points out that how dare Chani is to her and all that. Harah points out that, Chani would do anything for Paul, so Chani might actually agree with you more than you think about her marrying Paul. And that's something Jessica hasn't really thought about. So I really like this chapter because I really like the insight we get into how everything went from Alia's point of view. Because I find this whole thing in Other Memory really fascinating. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it, but how that would affect a person, it would have a massive effect, because now you would have all the memories of a past person, and then you would start to think you were that person, and what kind of effect it would have on the psyche and all that. And Alia was... And the other effect it has on Alia is Alia was never a child. She was always an adult. She was like an adult right out the gate, but even more than an adult with all this knowledge. So any naivety she would have had or innocence she never had it. That's the impact it would have had. She never had a chance to be naive. When you're growing up and when you're a child, one of the great things about being a child is being innocent and naive about the world, and everything in the world being new to you, and a lot of things just going over your head that no longer goes over your head as an adult. As an adult, you're more just bombarded by daily realities and things that you had no concept of when you were a child. So for Alia, she never ever experienced that. That was never a thing for her. She doesn't know what that's like because she was born with all these past memories. So in a way, she can only remember it, I guess, through past lives, but she's never experienced it firsthand for herself, as opposed to somebody else. So that's one thing, having this happen to you kind of robbed her of that. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And and then more about the insight on how Jessica thinks of Chani's marriage to Paul, or them possibly hooking up and stuff like that, where everything is driven by political maneuvering, things like that. So interesting. Again, interesting chapter. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.